All right. Good morning, everybody. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, good morning. That's as educated as I will be in this address. I was tasked with the very important homework of starting with youth perspectives. And that is a big task, honestly. And I feel a lot of power and responsibility of being standing here. But the thing is that you also brought a Colombian young person, so that also means that we can shake things up a bit. And I was allowed to go a bit crazy here. So I want to start by asking you all to please close your eyes for a couple of seconds. Close your eyes. And please travel back to your childhood years. Maybe imagine your 8-year-old self running wherever you grew up, running around the house or the living room, the dining room, and then seeing that a group of adults that maybe was relevant growing up, it can be your parents, caregivers, any other group of adults, you see them and they're having an interesting conversation that you want to be a part of. And you approach them and you say, "Hi, can I talk to you?" And then one of them turns around and tells you, "I'm sorry, sweetie, this is an adults-only conversation. You can go back to play. Please open your eyes." And I want to see a show of hands of who could relate to this experience of being told that this was an adults-only conversation. Okay, maybe many of us, okay. And I'm not blaming my parents, my amazing parents here, but I can relate to that experience. And I feel that this is the perfect introduction to talk about what concerns us today, which is children, youth, data, AI, and all of the different ways in which those things are interacting. And because we cannot talk about AI without talking about data, let me start by sharing some key data points that I feel are quite compelling to this audience. Did you know that 72 million pieces of data will be collected on every child across the world before their 13th birthday? Youth in the US, almost 95%, have access to a smartphone. And in Europe, almost 96% of youth say that they're online almost constantly. 2 out of 3 Latin American young people say that the lack of access to digital technologies hinders their ability to learn, which is why almost half of them advocate for more investment in digital infrastructure. And it's no secret that Africa's population is made up mainly of young people. And recent data, and I see my Harvard colleagues here, has pointed also to the fact that almost half of youth, at least in the global north, is using or accessing AI in a relatively frequent manner. So having said that, imagine being part of the most connected population ever, yet being the most disconnected from the conversations in which we're making decisions on how to use these technologies. The frustration that many of us felt growing up because we were told that this was an adults-only conversation is the frustration that children and youth are feeling for not being actively involved and meaningfully involved in these kinds of conversations. They're concerningly absent from the design of data-driven technologies that are targeting them as main users, and they're absent from these kinds of conversations in which we're also deciding how to govern those technologies. And yes, I have pointed to a pretty evident gap. And yes, we need to close the gap, obviously. But I want us to be a bit bolder. And I think that being bolder means that we can talk about youth-led innovation. And this is my big invitation today, to think about how does youth innovation look like for us? What does it mean? So a couple of years ago, at the Datasphere Initiative, we were one of the winners of the Future of Data Challenge, which kickstarted our Youth for a Data Future project. And for over 2 years, we have engaged over 15,000 young people from over 17 countries, and we have talked about many different things. We have talked about sexual and reproductive health. We have talked about child exploitation. We have talked about mental health, digital literacy, education, gender, climate change, and many other issues that concern youth globally nowadays. And we have been able also to connect those topics with data and AI. We have learned that sometimes engaging an 8-year-old in a conversation about data doesn't make a lot of sense. They don't really resonate a lot with that. But when you talk to them about the things that they care about, they find the links, and we can do those connections. So we have been discussing these things with them, and through a series of Youth for Data Labs, we have been involving them in the design of the solutions that will address all of the issues that they care about. The policy recommendations that we have created out of these labs have shaped conversations in the G20, the UN, of course, I hope, in this setting, and even the COP16, which is an event or is a conference meant to talk about biodiversity, and hopefully this year in Brazil that we have the COP30, we'll also be having some youth labs. So it's exciting to see that this is happening. And now I want to share a couple of the learnings that we've had from the project, because honestly, we're only getting started. And these are 3 key points. And again, let's go back to the show of hands, because that's cool and that gets people excited, engaged, and awake. So again, I want to see a show of hands and know how many of you have had nightmares, or maybe not necessarily a nightmare, but stayed up all night or a couple of hours at night thinking about the horrific things that can happen to children and youth with all of these crazy technologies that exist nowadays. Who has nightmares? Okay, I mean, fine. We're all talking about the risks, we're all talking about the harms, and this is very important, I swear it is. But the thing is that it leads us to being hopeless. And we cannot be hopeless when it's in our hands to shape those solutions. And what we've learned is that young people tend to be these very nice, playful, positive people that are in the room, and they actually bring that hopefulness that we need. So first thing, we need more positive approaches. Let's bring the youth so that we can also be more positive about the opportunities that data and AI can unlock with all of the things that we're facing, but let's also bring them because we need to be more hopeful. We cannot afford being hopeless in a world that, yes, looks horrible, but we need to be hopeful. So that's first. We need more positive approaches. And that's why I think I was brought here, because I'm kind of like the crazy shakiness Colombian one. So yes, first, we need more hopefulness. Second, and again, Professor Joaquim, thank you, because we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago talking about what does meaningful engagement look like? And this is how it looks like. It means embedding youth in the middle of the conversation. And I have to say that I've been to many different conferences where the youth conference or the youth panel is on the last day, right before the closing ceremony, when nobody really wants to attend anything. And that's where you're keeping the youth. So it's beautiful to have this embedded and woven into the whole agenda. So youth engagement means going beyond tokenization. And again, having meaningful youth engagement doesn't mean having one person speak on behalf of a whole generation. It means being intentional on what are the spaces and what are the methodologies to bring youth into the conversation. So that's second. Beyond tokenization, and youth need to be involved from the start. And then third, I've gotten pretty playful here, and I thank you for that. But that's the other learning. Actually, we need to be more playful and open to experimentation. Britta and I were having a conversation 2 nights ago about the importance of maybe rethinking the way in which we're doing policy. And this is what young people are teaching us. And yes, I'm young, but kind of there. That's what we're learning when we're discussing these things with 10-year-olds, that we're missing playfulness. And I want now, again, let's do a show of hands. Who played with sandboxes, building blocks, Legos as a child? Okay, good. Again, then you're all familiar with what a sandbox is. That is one of our big projects at the Datasphere Initiative, and we're pretty much using sandboxes and many other methodologies to experiment with technology, to experiment with policy, and to create much more responsible policymaking. Because yes, the traditional ways in which we have been doing policy have, or pretty much look like, I go with a proposal to the Congress, and then the Congress is going to discuss, and then all of the adults are going to have interesting debates, and then you have a law. And that's, according to how we've done things for a while, how things get solved. But we're seeing that we're facing complex challenges, and the traditional way of doing things is not working. So then why don't we get playful and experiment with other ways of engaging children, engaging youth, but also fixing the most pressing issues that we have. So having said that, I just wanted to share that today we're also taking this opportunity to launch the Youth for Data Lab Toolkit, which is the report that synthesizes the first iteration of the Youth for a Data Future project. I brought postcards because those are cool. So I'll share them around afterwards so that you can take a look. But most importantly, and besides sharing that, which is a report that condenses the methodology and explains how are we doing youth engagement, I also wanted to invite you to join this movement. And when I call this a movement, I mean that this is an invitation to think about youth-led innovation. I invite you all to join us and hopefully rethink the ways in which we're doing things. Because in the end, this building of a responsible digital future can only be done if we enhance innovation with, for, and by youth.